They say the devil is in the details, but sometimes the devil is sitting right across the table from you. Adrian Volkov was the most feared man in New York, a billionaire with blood on his hands and ice in his veins. He was seconds away from signing a merger that would crown him king of the underworld. He thought he had total control. He was wrong. It took a broke, invisible waitress to spot what his high-priced lawyers missed. She spoke 6 words that saved his empire and ruined her life. Excuse me, but this is a trap. The air inside the Obsidian Room, the most exclusive private dining area in Manhattan, smelled of truffle oil, aged leather, and fear. Sarah Bennett adjusted the collar of her stiff black uniform. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them to steady as she balanced the tray. She needed this job. After her father's medical debts had drained her savings and forced her to drop out of her second year at Columbia Law, waiting tables at a mob-owned restaurant was the only way to keep the lights on. "More wine," a gruff voice commanded from the head of the table. Sarah approached silently. The man speaking was Victor Sterling, a heavy-set real estate tycoon with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Opposite him sat Adrian Volkov. Sarah had heard the whispers in the kitchen. Adrian Volkov wasn't just a businessman. He was a shark in a tailored suit. He had dark hair swept back, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of steel. He didn't look at her as she poured the vintage Cabernet. His gaze was fixed on the thick document resting between them. "It's a standard acquisition, Adrian," Sterling said, tapping the paper with a gold pen. "You get the shipping lanes, I get the liquid capital. A clean break. We've been negotiating this for 6 months. Just sign, and the ports are yours." Adrian picked up the pen. The room went deadly quiet. Even the bodyguards in the corners seemed to stop breathing. Sarah finished pouring the wine. As she pulled the bottle back, her eyes inadvertently drifted to the open page on the table. It was upside down, but reading upside down was a skill she had mastered during late-night study sessions at the library. She saw the heading, subsection 4.2, Contingent Liabilities. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She shouldn't look. She should walk away. But her eyes scanned the fine print. It was a block of dense legalese, deliberately obfuscated. Transferee assumes all pre-existing environmental indemnities and pending class action litigations regarding the Delta site. Sarah froze. She knew the Delta site case. It was a massive, toxic tort lawsuit buried in the news cycle, worth nearly $500 million in damages. If Adrian signed this, he wasn't just buying shipping lanes. He was buying a bankruptcy-level lawsuit that Sterling was trying to offload. Adrian, the nib of the pen, touched the paper. "Excuse me," Sarah said. Her voice was a whisper, but in the silence, it sounded like a gunshot. Adrian stopped. The tip of the pen hovered millimeters from the signature line. He slowly looked up, his expression unreadable. "What?" Sterling's face flushed red. "Get out," he snapped at Sarah. "The staff is not to speak." Sarah clutched the wine bottle against her chest like a shield. I'm sorry, sir, but you shouldn't sign that." Adrian lowered the pen. He turned his chair slightly, giving her his full, terrifying attention. "And why is that?" "You're a waitress," Sterling hissed, standing up. "This is a billion-dollar merger. Get the manager. Get her out of here." "Sit down, Victor," Adrian said calmly. His voice was low, smooth, and laced with a threat that made Sterling sink back into his chair. Adrian looked at Sarah. "Speak. Why shouldn't I sign?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Clause 4.2, sir. The indemnity transfer." She pointed a trembling finger at the upside-down text. It uses the phrase, universal assumption of liability. You aren't just buying the assets. You're agreeing to take full responsibility for the Delta Site class action suit. Sterling isn't selling you a company. He's dumping a toxic asset on you to save his own skin. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Adrian picked up the document. He didn't just glance at it. He read it. He scrutinized the paragraph she had pointed out. Slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a predator realizing the trap had failed. He looked at Sterling. "Is this true, Victor?" Sterling was sweating now, beads of perspiration forming on his upper lip. "It's standard boilerplate, Adrian. My lawyers must have left it in by mistake. It means nothing." "It means," Adrian said, his voice dropping an octave, "that you tried to steal $500 million from me." Adrian stood up. He didn't yell. He simply closed the folder. "The deal is off," Adrian said. "And Victor, if I see you in New York tomorrow, your family will be planning a funeral." Sterling scrambled out of his chair, knocking it over, and fled the room with his associates trailing behind him. Now, it was just Adrian, his 2 guards, and Sarah. Sarah felt the adrenaline crash. She realized what she had done. She had humiliated a powerful man in front of a more powerful man. I'll go get the check," she stammered, turning to flee. "Stop." She froze. Adrian walked around the table. He was taller than she expected, looming over her. He smelled of expensive cologne and danger. He reached out and took the wine bottle from her hands, setting it on the table. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sarah. Sarah Bennett." "You're not just a waitress, Sarah Bennett," he observed, his eyes scanning her face, as if memorizing her. "Waitresses don't know about indemnity clauses or toxic torts. I used to be a law student. Columbia. I had to drop out. Why? Family reasons. Money." Adrian nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black card with nothing but a gold phone number embossed on it. He slid it into the front pocket of her apron. His fingers brushed against the fabric, sending a jolt of electricity through her. "You're fired," he said. Sarah's stomach dropped. "What?" "Please, sir, I need this job. I just saved you." "You're fired from this job," Adrian corrected. "Report to the address I'm about to text you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." "What job is that?" she asked, bewildered. Adrian turned to walk away, his guards falling into step behind him. He paused at the door and looked back. "My personal contract consultant, because clearly, my current lawyers are idiots." Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat in her tiny, drafty apartment in Queens, staring at the black card on her chipped coffee table. Her roommate, a nurse named Chloe, looked at the card with wide eyes. "Sarah, are you insane? That's Adrian Volkov. Everyone knows the Volkov family runs the docks, the unions, and half the city council. You don't work for them. You run away from them." "I have Dad's surgery next week, Chloe," Sarah said, her voice tired. "The insurance denied the appeal again. If I don't come up with $50,000, the hospital won't operate. Volkov is dangerous, yes, but poverty is lethal." The next morning, Sarah stood in front of the Volkov Tower in Midtown. It was a monolith of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the sky. She smoothed down her pencil skirt, the only professional outfit she still owned, and walked inside. Security was tighter than an airport. She was scanned, patted down, and her phone was confiscated before she was escorted to the top floor. The elevator doors opened directly into a sprawling office that overlooked the entire city. Adrian was behind a massive mahogany desk, speaking on a landline in Russian. He slammed the phone down as she entered. "You're 2 minutes early," he said, not looking up from a stack of files. "I like that." "Mr. Volkov," Sarah said, clutching her purse. "I'm here to discuss the terms." Adrian looked up then. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face. He gestured to a chair. "Sit." Sarah sat. She felt small in the leather chair. "I had you vetted last night," Adrian said casually. "Sarah Bennett, top 5% of your class, dropped out 6 months ago. Father, Thomas Bennett, suffering from advanced cardiac failure, outstanding medical debt, $42,000. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Is there anything you don't know?" "I don't know why you intervened last night," Adrian said, leaning back. "Most people would have let me sign. Most people would have enjoyed watching a rich man lose money." "I don't like bullies," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her fear. "And that contract was a bully wrapped in paper." Adrian studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Then he slid a piece of paper across the desk. "This is your employment contract." Sarah picked it up. She read it quickly, her legal training kicking in. Her eyes widened. "The salary. $10,000 a week, plus full medical coverage for you and immediate family. That covers your father's surgery." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a lifeline. It was a miracle. But then she read the next clause. Clause 9. Confidentiality and ownership. The employee agrees that their life, safety, and loyalty are the sole property of the Volkov estate. Resignation is not permitted without employer consent. "This," Sarah pointed to the clause. "This isn't an employment contract, Mr. Volkov. This is an indenture. Resignation is not permitted. That's illegal." Adrian stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against the edge, crossing his arms. His biceps strained against the fabric of his white dress shirt. "We operate in a grey world, Sarah. You saw that last night. If you work for me, you will see things that can send me to prison for life. I need to know you are bound to me." "Completely." He leaned in closer. His face was inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. "You have a choice," he whispered. "Walk out that door, go back to serving pasta, and watch your father die because the system failed you. Or sign the paper, sell your soul to me, and save him." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. It was cruel, it was manipulative, and it was the only option she had. She thought of her father, pale and weak in the hospital bed, telling her not to worry about the money while he gasped for air. Sarah picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake this time. She signed her name. "Smart girl," Adrian said softly. The moment the ink dried, the office door burst open. A tall man with blonde hair and a panicked expression rushed in. It was Liam, Adrian's head of security. "Boss, we have a problem," Liam said, ignoring Sarah. "The shipment at the Jersey port. It's been seized." Adrian's face went cold. The seduction of the moment vanished, replaced by the ruthlessness of the Don. "By the feds?" "No," Liam said grimly. "By the Rossi family. They claim the paperwork for the transfer was invalid. They say the port belongs to them now." Adrian slammed his fist onto the desk, making Sarah jump. "Sterling!" he snarled. "He must have tipped them off before I threatened him." Adrian turned to Sarah. The look in his eyes was wild, terrifying. "Welcome to the job, Sarah," he said. "Get your coat. We're going to New Jersey." "Me?" Sarah squeaked. "Why me?" "Because you're going to prove that the Rossi family is lying," Adrian said, grabbing his jacket. "And if you fail, a lot of people are going to die today." Sarah scrambled to follow him to the elevator. She had signed a contract to be a legal consultant, not a mob wife or a soldier. As the elevator plummeted down, she realized the trap she had warned Adrian about the night before was nothing compared to the trap she had just walked into. She was now property of the Volkov family, and the war had just begun. The drive to the New Jersey docks was a blur of speed and silence. Adrian drove the black SUV himself, weaving through traffic with a terrifying precision. Liam sat in the passenger seat, checking a semi-automatic pistol. Sarah sat in the back, surrounded by piles of documents Liam had tossed at her. "Find it," Adrian ordered, his eyes on the road. "Find what?" Sarah asked, flipping through the property deeds of the shipping containers. "The loophole," Adrian said. "The Rossi family is basing their claim on an old territorial agreement from 1995. They say because the previous owner died without a direct heir, the land reverts to the original syndicate. Them." Sarah scanned the documents. Her motion sickness was fighting with her anxiety. "But you bought the debt, right? The bank seized the land." "The bank thought they seized the land," Adrian corrected. "If the Rossi claim holds up, the bank never owned it, which means they couldn't sell it to me. And if I lose this port, I lose the ability to move product for the next 3 months. My enemies will smell blood." They arrived at the docks. It was a desolate landscape of rusted metal and grey water. A dozen cars were parked in a circle. Men with guns stood openly by the vehicles. Adrian stopped the car. He turned to look at Sarah. "Stay in the car," he ordered. "Read the files. If you find something, text me. Do not come out." "Adrian, this is insane," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "They have guns." "So do I," he said, and for a split second his gaze softened. "Lock the doors." He stepped out. Sarah watched through the tinted window as Adrian walked toward a group of men. The leader of the opposing group, a man with a scar running down his cheek, Luca Rossi, stepped forward. They began to argue. Hands were waved. Chests were puffed. It was primal. It was violent. Sarah forced herself to look down at the papers. She had to focus. 1995. Agreement, territorial rights, succession. She read line after line. Then she saw it. A stamp on the back of a survey map attached to the 1995 deed. Municipal rezoning order, 2004. When the city rezoned the waterfront in 2004, the plot of land designated in the Rossi Agreement was reclassified from private commercial to mixed use public and private. According to New Jersey state law, any territorial exclusivity agreements made by private entities are null and void if the land is rezoned for public utility access. The Rossis didn't own the rights, the city did. And the city had leased it to the bank, who sold it to Adrian. The Rossi claim wasn't just weak, it was legally non-existent. Sarah looked up. The shouting outside had stopped. Guns were being raised. Luca Rossi was pointing a pistol at Adrian's chest. Adrian wasn't backing down, but he was outgunned. Sarah didn't think. She didn't calculate. She unlocked the door and threw it open. "Stop!" she screamed, waving the blue file folder. Every head turned. 20 guns shifted slightly. Adrian looked at her with a mixture of horror and fury. "Sarah, get back in the car!" She ignored him. She marched across the gravel, her heels wobbling on the uneven ground. She walked right up to Luca Rossi and shoved the paper toward him. "You're trespassing," she said, her voice shaking but loud. Rossi laughed. "Who is this? Your mistress? Volkov?" "She is my counsel," Adrian said, his hand inching toward his jacket. "Your claim is based on the 95 agreement," Sarah said rapidly. "But look at the timestamp. The 2004 Rezoning Act voided all exclusivity clauses. Section 12 of the Municipal Code. If you shoot him, you aren't defending your property. You're murdering a man on public access land. The feds won't treat this as a mob dispute. They'll treat it as domestic terrorism on state property. You'll bring the FBI down on your entire family by sunset." Rossi hesitated. He looked at the paper, then at his own consigliere, who was squinting at the document. The consigliere whispered something in Rossi's ear. Rossi's face paled. He lowered the gun. "You're lucky you have a smart lawyer, Volkov," Rossi spat. "This isn't over." "It is for today," Adrian said coldly. "Get off my land." The Rossi crew retreated, cars peeling away. Adrian didn't move until they were gone. Then he turned to Sarah. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. He grabbed her by the shoulders. "I told you to stay in the car!" he roared. "I saved you!" she yelled back, the adrenaline making her bold. "Again! You could have been killed, and you would have been dead if I hadn't." They stared at each other, chest to chest, breathing hard. The anger in Adrian's eyes shifted into something else, something hotter. The intensity of the danger had stripped away the formalities. He looked at her mouth. She looked at his. "You are a terrifying woman, Sarah Bennett," he whispered. "I'm just a waitress," she whispered back. "Not anymore." He released her abruptly, stepping back as if burned. "Get in the car. We have work to do." But as Sarah climbed back into the SUV, she saw Adrian's hand shaking slightly as he lit a cigarette. He wasn't as made of ice as he pretended, and for the first time, she realized that working for the devil might be the most exciting thing she had ever done. But she didn't know that, from the shadows of the shipping containers, someone else had been watching. Someone who took a photo of Sarah Bennett. Victor Sterling received the photo on his phone miles away. He smiled. "So," Sterling muttered to himself, "Volkov has a new weakness. Good to know." 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the Jersey docks. Sarah Bennett was no longer just the woman who served wine. She was the gatekeeper of Volkov Enterprises. Her new office was adjacent to Adrian's. It was sleek, modern, and filled with the scent of fresh lilies that Adrian had ordered, though he claimed it was his assistant, Liam, who sent them. Sarah had spent the last 20 days restructuring Adrian's legitimate holdings. She found shell companies bleeding money, contracts that were barely legal, and liabilities that could sink a nation. She fixed them all, but proximity to the fire meant getting burned. "Wear this," Adrian said, walking into her office on a rainy Tuesday evening. He tossed a garment bag onto her couch. Sarah looked up from a stack of tax affidavits. "I'm busy, Adrian. The IRS audit for the construction arm is tomorrow." "The audit can wait. The governor's charity gala is tonight. You're coming with me." "As your lawyer?" "As my date," Adrian corrected, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Sterling will be there. He's been quiet since the docks. Too quiet. I need eyes on him, and you see things others miss." 2 hours later, Sarah stood before a floor-length mirror in Adrian's penthouse guest suite. The dress was emerald green silk, backless, and fit her like a second skin. It was weaponized beauty. When she walked into the living room, Adrian stopped pouring his scotch. He didn't say a word. He just stared, his steel-grey eyes darkening with an emotion that terrified and thrilled her. "Do not leave my side," he murmured as he helped her into the car. The gala was a sea of diamonds and deceit held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Waiters circulated with champagne while the city's elite whispered behind their hands. Sarah felt the weight of their stares. She was the unknown element on the arm of the city's most dangerous bachelor. Adrian was pulled away by a senator within minutes. 5 minutes, he told Sarah, squeezing her hand. "Stay by the bar." Sarah ordered a sparkling water, scanning the room. That was when Victor Sterling appeared. He didn't look like a defeated man. He looked smug. "Miss Bennett," Sterling purred, stepping into her personal space. "You clean up nicely. From apron to couture. A classic Cinderella story." "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her voice cold. "If you're here to discuss the port, speak to Mr. Volkov. I'm off the clock." "Oh, I'm not here for the port. I'm here for you." Sterling took a sip of his martini. "You think you're special, don't you? You think you're the first bright young thing Adrian has plucked from obscurity? Ask him about Catherine." Sarah stiffened. "Who is Catherine?" Sterling smiled, showing too many teeth. His previous consultant. She was brilliant, too. She found a discrepancy in his books. She thought she was helping. But Adrian doesn't like people who know too much. She disappeared 3 years ago. They say she moved to Europe. I say she's under the foundation of one of his skyscrapers." "I don't believe you," Sarah said, though a cold knot formed in her stomach. "You don't have to," Sterling said, reaching into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out a small encrypted flash drive and slid it onto the bar counter next to her hand. "This contains the police report filed by Catherine's parents, and it contains proof that the medical fund paying for your father's heart surgery, it's a money laundering front. If the feds raid it, the assets freeze. Your father's treatment stops instantly." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Adrian is using your father as leverage, my dear," Sterling whispered. "He owns you, but I can set you free. Bring me the Volkov ledger for the construction unions by tomorrow night, and I'll pay off your father's medical bills in cash. Clean money, no strings." Sterling walked away, disappearing into the crowd just as Adrian returned. "Who was that?" Adrian asked, his eyes narrowing as he saw Sterling's retreating back. "No one," Sarah lied quickly, sliding the flash drive into her clutch. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Just someone asking for a donation." Adrian looked at her. He knew she was lying. He reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb tracing her jawline. "Sarah, in my world, secrets are dangerous. Do not keep them from me." "I'm tired, Adrian," she said, pulling away. "Can we go?" For the first time, Sarah looked at Adrian and didn't see a savior. She saw a predator. And she had to know the truth. The next morning, the atmosphere in Volkov Tower was suffocating. Sarah had spent the night reading the files on Sterling's flash drive. It looked authentic. There were police reports, bank transfers, emails. It painted Adrian not as a businessman, but as a monster who disposed of anyone who became a liability. She sat at her desk, her hands trembling as she accessed the internal server. She needed to cross-reference the medical fund. If Sterling was right, if Adrian was laundering money through her father's illness, she was complicit in a felony, and her father was a pawn. She found the file. Project Aegis. Medical disbursement. She clicked to open it. Access denied. She tried her override code. Access denied. "Looking for something?" Sarah spun around. Adrian was standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his usual jacket. His sleeves were rolled up, and he looked exhausted and furious. Liam stood behind him, holding a tablet. I was just checking the insurance protocols," Sarah stammered. Adrian walked into the room. He didn't yell. The silence was worse. He walked to her desk, picked up her purse, and dumped the contents out. The encrypted flash drive clattered onto the glass surface. "Liam tracked the signal from the drive the moment you plugged it into your laptop at home," Adrian said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's a tracker, Sarah. You led Sterling's hackers right into my private network last night." Sarah gasped. "No, I didn't know. He gave it to me at the party. He said I was a monster?" Adrian cut her off. "He told you about Catherine? He told you I was laundering money?" Sarah stared at him. "How do you know?" "Because that is the same script he used on Catherine," Adrian said. "Only Catherine didn't just listen. She sold me out. She stole $10 million and fled to Brazil. She isn't dead, Sarah. She's living on a beach in Rio on my dime because I let her go." Adrian slammed his hand on the desk. "I trusted you. I let you into my house. I let you into my head. And the first time an enemy whispers a lie, you turn on me?" "I was trying to protect my father," Sarah cried, standing up. "He showed me documents." "Forged!" Adrian roared. "Sterling played you. He needed access to my server, and you gave it to him. Do you know what you've done? You've just given him the blueprints to the union deal." Adrian turned his back on her. He walked to the window, looking out at the city. "Get out!" "Adrian, please, let me fix it," Sarah pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I said get out." He didn't turn around. "Liam, escort her out, revoke her security clearance, and cancel the payments to the hospital." Sarah felt like she had been punched in the gut. "No, Adrian, you promised. My father—" "The contract is void," Adrian said coldly. "You breached Clause 9. Loyalty. You are no longer my employee. You are nothing." Liam grabbed Sarah's arm gently but firmly. "Come on, Sarah, don't make this harder." Sarah was dragged out of the office, past the staring secretaries, and into the elevator. She was dumped on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue with nothing but her box of personal items. It started to rain. Sarah stood there, drenched and broken. She had lost the job. She had lost the money for her father. And worst of all, she realized, as her heart shattered in her chest, she had lost the man she had foolishly fallen in love with. But as the rain washed over her, a spark of anger ignited in her chest. Adrian hadn't even let her explain. He had cut her off instantly. He was a tyrant. "Fine," she whispered to the empty street. "You want a war, Adrian? I know your contracts better than you do." She hailed a cab. She wasn't going home. She was going to the one place Adrian would never expect. 3 days later, Sarah's father, Thomas, was stabilized, but only because Sarah had sold her grandmother's jewelry to pay for a few more days of care. She was running on caffeine and rage. She sat in a small, dimly lit diner in Brooklyn. Across from her sat a man named Gavin O'Connor. Gavin was a disbarred lawyer, a man who knew where all the bodies were buried in New York's legal system because he had helped bury half of them. "You're asking for suicide, kid," Gavin said, stirring his coffee. "You want to sue Adrian Volkov? He doesn't go to court. He settles, or the plaintiff disappears." "I don't want to sue him," Sarah said, her eyes dark circles of exhaustion. "I want to force him to listen. Sterling framed me. The flash drive was a tracker, yes, but it was also a two-way mirror. When I plugged it in, it didn't just upload data to Sterling. It downloaded a file onto my laptop." She pushed her laptop toward Gavin. "Look at the timestamp." Gavin squinted at the screen. 2:09 a.m., the night of the gala. Exactly, after I was fired. The drive was still in my bag. Sterling activated a remote download. He planted a digital signature on my computer to make it look like I authorized the transfer of the union blueprints. But look at the IP address. Gavin typed a few commands. His eyebrows shot up. "It's not your IP. It's proxied through the City Hall server." "Sterling isn't just a businessman," Sarah said. "He's working with Councilman Holloway. They're trying to use the RICO Act to seize Adrian's assets so they can buy them at auction for pennies. They needed a patsy to bridge the gap between Adrian's illegal dealings and the public sector. I was the bridge. So Sterling set you up to look like the mole, so Adrian would fire you," Gavin mused. "Because as long as you were Adrian's lawyer, you had attorney-client privilege. Once you're fired, you can be subpoenaed." Sarah nodded grimly. "The FBI is going to arrest me tomorrow. Sterling is going to hand me over as the disgruntled employee willing to testify against Volkov. If I don't testify, I go to jail for corporate espionage. If I do testify, Adrian goes to jail for life." "So what's the plan?" Gavin asked. "I need to get into the Volkov board meeting today at noon," Sarah said. "Impossible. Security will be tighter than Fort Knox." Sarah pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her bag. It was her original employment contract. "Not impossible," she said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. "Clause 14, subsection C. Volkov Tower. The boardroom. 12:15 p.m. The room was filled with the heads of the 5 families and the legitimate board members of Volkov Enterprises. Adrian sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His eyes were shadowed, his temper short. "The union deal is dead," Adrian was saying, his voice gravelly. "Someone leaked the blueprints. We have to pivot to—" The heavy oak doors slammed open. Liam stepped forward, hand on his gun, but stopped when he saw who it was. Sarah Bennett walked in. She was wearing a cheap suit she bought at a thrift store, but she wore it like armor. She held a briefcase in one hand and a megaphone of papers in the other. "Security!" a board member shouted. "Get her out!" "If you touch me," Sarah announced, her voice ringing clear across the room, "I will sue this company for breach of contract and wrongful termination, triggering an immediate freeze of all assets pending litigation." Adrian slowly stood up. He stared at her. "You have no contract. I fired you." "Actually," Sarah said, walking toward the table, "you didn't read the fine print, Mr. Volkov. Clause 14, subsection C, termination for cause requires a formal internal investigation and a hearing before the board of directors. You skipped the hearing. Therefore, I am still technically employed, and as your legal counsel, I have a fiduciary duty to warn you that you are walking into a trap." The room went silent. The other mob bosses looked at Adrian, amused and confused. "You have 2 minutes," Adrian said softly. "Then I throw you out the window myself." Sarah didn't flinch. She threw a file onto the table. "Victor Sterling isn't trying to steal your company, Adrian. He's trying to arrest you. That file contains the subpoena the FBI is preparing for me. Sterling faked the leak from my computer to strip me of privilege so he could force me to testify against you." She pointed to the screen at the end of the room. "And this—" She connected her phone to the casting system. "Is the audio recording from the gala." Sarah pressed play. The room filled with the sound of the clinking glasses, and then Sterling's voice, clear as day. "Bring me the Volkov ledger. I'll pay off your father's medical bills. If the feds raid it, the assets freeze." Sarah paused the recording. "He admitted to knowledge of a federal raid before it happened," Sarah said. "That proves conspiracy. Sterling is working with the feds, but he's playing them too. He's trying to cut a deal to take over your territory once you're gone." Adrian looked at the file. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at Sarah. For 3 days, he had felt nothing but rage and betrayal. He had convinced himself she was just another gold digger. But standing here, defending him when she could have walked away, when she could have turned witness and saved herself, changed everything. She wasn't a traitor. She was the most loyal soldier he had ever had. "Why?" Adrian asked, his voice low. "Why come back? You know I cut off your father's funding. You should hate me." "I do hate you," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "You hurt me. You didn't trust me. But I took an oath as a lawyer, even if I never finished my degree. And I don't let bullies win. Sterling is a bully. And you—" She took a deep breath. "You are the only man who ever looked at me and saw power, not just a waitress. Don't let him beat you, Adrian." Sarah turned to leave. She had done her part. She had cleared her name. "Sarah," Adrian called out. She stopped at the door. "Clause 15, Adrian said. Sarah frowned. "There is no Clause 15. "There is now," Adrian said. He walked down the length of the table, ignoring the stunned board members. He stopped in front of her. The ice in his eyes was gone, replaced by a burning intensity. "Clause 15. The employee is entitled to absolute protection and infinite forgiveness, provided the employer was an idiot." He reached out and took her hand. "I will fix your father's situation. I will destroy Sterling. But I need my lawyer back. Will you take the case?" Sarah looked at his hand, then at his face. The smart move was to run, but she was done running. "I'm expensive, Mr. Volkov," she whispered. "Name your price." "I want half," she said. Adrian smirked. "Half my company?" "No, half the decision-making power. No more secrets. No more shutting me out. We are partners, or I walk." Adrian brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Deal." The city of New York lay beneath them, a sprawling grid of golden lights and deep shadows. In the penthouse of Volkov Tower, the mood had shifted from desperation to a cold, razor-sharp focus. Sarah stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the rain lash against the glass. She wasn't wearing the thrift store suit anymore. Adrian had called a stylist within 10 minutes of the board meeting ending. Now, she wore a tailored white pantsuit that made her look like a modern-day avenging angel. Adrian walked up behind her. He didn't touch her, but she could feel his heat radiating against her back. "You're quiet," he said. His voice was rough, tired, but the edge of anger was gone, replaced by a deep, vibrating tension. "I'm thinking about the time stamp," Sarah said, turning to face him. "Sterling thinks the FBI raid is scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. He believes the evidence he planted on my laptop, the doctored union blueprints, is enough to get a federal warrant to storm this building." "It is enough," Adrian admitted. He handed her a glass of whiskey. "If the feds come through those doors tomorrow, they will find the real books. I didn't have time to move them. Sterling's timing was perfect." "Sterling's timing was predictable," Sarah corrected. She took a sip, the amber liquid burning pleasantly in her throat. "He thinks he's playing chess, Adrian. But he's playing poker, and he doesn't know I marked the deck." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "When I was at the diner with Gavin, we didn't just trace the hack," Sarah said, a small, dangerous smile curving her lips. "We realized the connection was still open. Sterling's malware was a two-way street. He was pulling data from my laptop, but the tunnel remained active for 17 minutes. She walked over to the massive oak desk, the same desk where she had first signed her life away. She picked up a thick red folder. "I uploaded a file back to him," she said. Adrian froze. "You what?" "I sent a file titled Volkov Offshore Accounts Master List PDF," Sarah said. "Sarah," Adrian warned, his voice dropping dangerously low, "please tell me you didn't actually give him my offshore accounts." "Of course not," she scoffed. "It was a zip bomb, a decoy file. On the surface, it looks like terabytes of incriminating financial data. But inside the code, I embedded a digital tracer, a poison pill. As soon as Sterling opened that file on his secure server to verify it, the tracer mapped his entire hard drive." Sarah opened the folder and spread the photos across the desk. "Sterling isn't just a dirty businessman, Adrian. He's the banker for the cartel down in Mexico. That's where he gets his liquidity. The tracer found his true ledger. He's been laundering cartel money through the very City Hall construction projects he accused you of corrupting." Adrian looked at the documents. His eyes widened. He picked up a bank statement showing a transfer of $50 million from a shell company in Juarez to a frantic account held by Councilman Holloway. "You found this in 17 minutes?" Adrian asked, looking at her with something akin to awe. "I'm a very good researcher," she whispered, "and I was very motivated." Adrian let out a short, dark laugh. He walked around the desk and grabbed her face in his hands. This time he didn't pull away. He kissed her, hard, possessive, and searing. It tasted of whiskey and victory. "So," Adrian murmured against her lips, "we have the evidence to bury him. What is the play?" "He expects a show tomorrow," Sarah said, pulling back slightly to look into his steel-grey eyes. "He expects to stand outside this building and watch the FBI drag you out in handcuffs. I say we give him a show, but not the one he paid for." The next morning, 7:55 a.m., the plaza outside Volkov Tower was chaotic. News vans were parked on the curbs, satellite dishes raised. A perimeter had been established by NYPD, but there were also black SUVs with federal plates idling at the intersection. Victor Sterling stood near the fountain, holding a coffee cup, looking every bit the concerned citizen. Beside him stood Councilman Holloway. They were watching the front doors of the tower, waiting. Up in the penthouse, Sarah checked her watch. "It's time." She and Adrian stepped into the private elevator. Liam and the security team were already in the lobby, armed but instructed strictly not to engage. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked as the numbers counted down. "I was born ready," Sarah said. She smoothed her lapels. "Let's go catch a rat." The elevator doors opened. They walked through the lobby, hand in hand. The moment they stepped out into the crisp morning air, the cameras started flashing. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Volkov, is it true you're under investigation for racketeering? Ms. Bennett, are you testifying against your employer?" Sterling saw them emerge. He smiled, a triumphant, ugly smirk. He walked forward, flanked by two men who looked like federal agents. "Adrian," Sterling called out, his voice projecting for the cameras, "I advised you to surrender. It didn't have to end like this." Adrian stopped on the steps. He looked tall, dark, and utterly unbothered. Sarah stood beside him, her chin high. "And like what, Victor?" Adrian asked casually. "The FBI is here to execute a warrant," Sterling said, gesturing to the black SUVs, "for the union fraud and for the murder of Catherine Pierce." The crowd gasped. The cameras zoomed in. "Catherine Pierce is alive!" Sarah's voice cut through the noise. Sterling faltered for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me?" "Catherine Pierce," Sarah repeated louder. "Currently residing in Florianopolis, Brazil. I spoke to her on Zoom this morning. She's actually quite happy, though she says you still owe her the last installment of the bribe you paid her to frame Mr. Volkov 3 years ago." Sterling's face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I?" Sarah reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. She held it up. "We're streaming this live to the district attorney's office, Victor. And to the press pool." She tapped the screen. A video played. Catherine Pierce, holding a newspaper from today, confessing everything. "That proves nothing," Holloway shouted, stepping in. "This is a distraction. Officer, arrest these two." The lead federal agent stepped out of the black SUV. He was a tall man with a grim face. He walked up the steps toward Adrian and Sarah. Sterling smirked. "Game over, Adrian." The agent stopped in front of Adrian. He looked at him, then at Sarah. Then he turned around and walked back down the steps, directly toward Victor Sterling. "Victor Sterling?" the agent asked. "Yes, I'm the witness," Sterling said, confused. "Get them." "Victor Sterling, you are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism," the agent said, spinning Sterling around and slamming him against the hood of the news van. "What?" Sterling shrieked. "No, you have the wrong guy. The warrant is for Volkov. The warrant was changed 10 minutes ago, Sarah said, walking down the steps. She stopped right next to Sterling as the cuffs clicked onto his wrists. When I emailed the evidence of your cartel dealings to the special agent in charge. Sterling looked at her, his eyes bulging. You waitress. You tricked me. Sarah leaned in close so only he could hear. You should have read the fine print, Victor, she whispered coldly. The clause in the contract said, universal assumption of liability. By hacking my computer, you assumed liability for every file on it, including the ones I planted. Councilman Holloway tried to run, but Liam blocked his path, smiling pleasantly. Going somewhere, Councilman? Liam asked. The police have some questions about a $50 million wire transfer. As Sterling was shoved into the back of the police car, screaming obscenities, the cameras turned to Adrian and Sarah. Adrian put his arm around Sarah's waist. He didn't smile for the cameras. He looked at her. Well done, Counselor, he said. All in a day's work, boss, she replied. Partner, he corrected. All in a day's work, partner. 1 month later. The courtroom was silent. The judge banged the gavel. In the matter of the People versus Victor Sterling, the judge announced, the defendant has entered a plea of guilty to all charges in exchange for a life sentence without parole. Sarah let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for weeks. She sat in the back row. Next to her sat her father, Thomas Bennett. He looked thin, but his color was back. The surgery had been a success, paid for by the consulting bonus Adrian had deposited into Sarah's account the day after Sterling's arrest. He's gone, honey, Thomas said, squeezing her hand. You did it. We did it, Sarah said. She walked out of the courthouse and down the marble steps. A black Rolls-Royce was waiting at the curb. The window rolled down. Get in, Adrian said. Sarah slid into the back seat. Adrian was holding a bottle of champagne and 2 crystal flutes. To justice, he said, handing her a glass. To loopholes, Sarah replied, clinking her glass against his. The car pulled away, merging into the traffic of the city they now effectively owned. So, Adrian said, resting his hand on her knee. Sterling is gone. The business is clean. The ports are secure. What now? Sarah took a sip of champagne. She looked at him, feeling the familiar electric pull. They were 2 sharks swimming in the same tank and, somehow, instead of eating each other, they had learned to hunt together. Well, Sarah said, pulling a folded document from her purse. I was reviewing our partnership agreement. Adrian groaned playfully. Not another clause. Clause 21, Sarah said, her eyes twinkling. Subsection A. What does it say? Sarah handed him the paper. It wasn't a legal contract. It was a marriage license application. Adrian stared at it. The silence stretched for a moment, and Sarah felt a sudden spike of anxiety. Had she misread him? Had she gone too far? Then Adrian laughed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He tossed the paper aside and pulled her into his lap. Objection, he whispered against her neck. On what grounds? She breathed. This contract is incomplete, he said. It's missing a date. How about today? Sarah smiled, burying her hands in his hair. Today works. Drive to City Hall, Adrian ordered the driver. But sir, the driver said, confused. We just came from the courthouse. Just drive, Adrian said, kissing Sarah deeply. As the car sped through the streets of New York, Sarah Bennett realized that life, like a contract, was all about how you negotiated the terms. She had started with nothing but a uniform and a heavy debt. She was ending up with the world. She had found the one clause that mattered. Clause infinity. Love is the only trap you don't want to escape. And that, my friends, is the story of how one sharp-eyed waitress took down a billionaire bully and stole the heart of the most dangerous man in New York. It proves that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun, it's reading the fine print. Sarah and Adrian are now running the city, proving that they are the ultimate power couple. If you enjoyed this story of twists, betrayal, and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new Mafia romances and dramatic thrillers every week. What did you think of Sarah's plan? Would you have taken the deal? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.